So we're live.
It's just loading. Slowly. We are live.
We're live. Okay, good morning, everyone. For anyone who happens to be watching online, I'll apologize in advance for any glitches we encounter. We're trying to make this work in a weird, difficult time, but we'll conduct a regular council meeting today, and it will be recorded for future viewing. If we should go down unexpectedly, then stand by. Hopefully we'll get it back up and running again. So with that, I'll call to order the meeting of council for April the 17th. I'm looking to the agenda. Are there any additions, changes?
No, your worship.
In which case, I'll move the agenda be approved as presented. Those in favor? Before we call that vote, Councillor Comfort seems to have an issue.
It's April 7th, John, not the 17th.
I misspoke. I think we all know what today is except me. Okay, so in regards to approving the agenda, those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried unanimously. We have item F1. Are we doing an update on COVID under F1? No. Moving then to item G1, downtown business improvement area tax rate bylaw 2020-19.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to,
Lisa, you have a question? Thought we were going to leave Lisa's unmuted.
Yes, Mayor Borrellman, I don't believe you approved the minutes. So you need to go back to D1, approval of
But
the
you are right past the minute, sorry.
Thank you.
So looking to the minutes of the March 3rd meeting of council, are there errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? In favor? Opposed? We're gonna have to be quick with the hand up when I call in favor. Motion's carried. Now we're into downtown business improvement area tax rate bylaw. Ms. Richardson.
perfect. Just starting. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm here today regarding the Downtown Business Improvement Area BIA Tax Rate Bylaw 2020-09. There are two related recommendations. First, that council approve the Downtown Business Improvement Area budget for 2020 as presented, and then that council give first, second, and third reading to Bylaw 2020-09, the Downtown Business Improvement Area BIA Tax Rate Bylaw. As a reminder, this is how the process works. So annually, the board of the BIA establishes their budget, which is submitted to council for approval. A rate structure is established to collect the required revenues in accordance with that budget. And finally, the levy is then collected by the town on behalf of the BIA. In accordance with Alberta's Business Improvement Area Regulation 93/2016, council is required to approve the annual budget prior to passing the bylaw, and the BIA tax rate bylaw must be passed prior to May 1st. In light of the current COVID-19 pandemic, there was recently a ministerial order to revise some of the required deadlines in the Municipal Government Act and its associated regulations, but this section of the regulation wasn't included, so the original May deadline is still must be met. So the budget for approval has been included in attachment 1 to the request for decision report. So that's page 12 of the agenda package. The rate structure above is also included in the package on page 10 with a screen share. It might be a bit small for some people to read. Obviously, since the time of the original report writing, as we've all witnessed, the situation regarding COVID-19 and its impacts in our community has continued to further evolve. In light of the recent impact to businesses in the downtown Canmore BIA, the Board of Directors is currently considering revising their proposed budget and levy rather than what's put forward in the agenda package, to instead hold them to the 2019 level rather than the modest increase that was proposed originally for 2020. So that is currently under consideration by their board. There's a meeting on Wednesday of the board, and I would propose that because of this May 1st deadline, we proceed with what we have until their board has had time to review the proposal. But they are looking at changes in light of what's happened more recently. So just what's under consideration right now. So the 2020 rate structure would be revised from what was in the agenda package to this rate structure, which is consistent with the rates that were charged last year in 2019. And they have a proposed revised budget to increase the draw on the reserve to still meet some of the expenses and reduce some expenses. So they have a plan to address this, but this was all, as the situation has kind of continued to evolve, their board hasn't had a chance to completely ratify this budget. And so at this time, I'm proposing that we approve what was in the agenda package, that budget as presented, and the rate structure, and we can bring back a budget amendment once their board has had further opportunity to review, potentially at the May 5th meeting, but that would be after the required MGA deadline. So in conclusion, again, my recommendations are that council approve the Downtown Business Improvement Area BIA 2020 budget as presented so that we can meet that May 1st deadline, and then that council give first, second, and third reading to Bylaw 2020-09, the Downtown Business Improvement Area tax rate bylaw, with the understanding that the board is continuing to consider revisions based on the current economic situation. I'm happy to address any questions at this time, and Ms. Vandervoort is also on the line to address any questions regarding the BIA or their budget.
So because of the March 1st deadline, we have to proceed with an approval. We'll approve their budget as it was last week and bylaw, and then anticipate it coming back for a rescinding motion and new motion.
And sorry if I misspoke, the deadline's May 1st, but that would be correct.
Right. Okay. Seems awkward, but I guess that's what we have to do then.
I'm open to suggestions if there's another way of doing it. It's been a bit of a time crunch, and Ms. Vandervoort and I have been exploring different options and reviewing the regulation.
Right.
Just that May 1st deadline that I'm quite conscious of, and want to ensure that we do still have the opportunity to collect those BIA amounts this year.
Could you put back on the screen the newly revised? Did we see a newly revised budget a minute ago?
I do have one, yes, I'll put it on the screen. Sorry, it just went black for me. Is it for anybody else?
Yeah, it's black.
I
can see that, but it's pretty tiny.
Now it's good. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it this way. Yeah, so sorry, it's quite small trying to fit it on the screen. So I've just set like side by side rather than the long way to try to fit it. The most pertinent point is that the landlord's businesses with that holding at the 2019 levy rate would reduce that collection from them by about $5,000.
Right, so it doesn't actually account for very much of a change to the budget.
The increase proposed for 2020 for the rates was, I believe, 3%, so it wasn't a significant increase. But my understanding from Ms. Vandervoort is that they do want to be responsive to the current situation. And so holding the rates rather than proposing any increase would be an option they would like to explore at this time.
And I guess a question from Ms. Vandervoort, has the board, I'm sure they have been engaging with members at this time in regards to the budget?
But it's all happened rather quickly. We haven't at this time. It was something that has come up in the last few days. Should we be looking at holding the revision or the increase? So I apologize, Mayor Council, I should have addressed you properly. So at this point in time, just because of what is happening and knowing that many, even people on my board, aren't sure whether or not they're going to be open at the end of this, it just seemed to be a more responsible thing for us to do. So at first, we were discussing what the deferral would mean for us, but for us, we just cut back and slow down expenses and not particularly do certain kinds of projects that we originally planned for. And then when the money comes into the town, then our increase will, our deferral will be accommodated through the tax roll that's collected. So, and then as time has gone on, it's become sort of, how do we want to be seen by our members? Do we want to be seen as being responsible and wanting to understand the circumstances that they're under? And just to let you know that we have realigned some of our budget to stakeholder engagement and to other areas in the budget where it's more supportive of the downtown businesses directly through training, etc., rather than doing the Easter Bunny or something around Easter or some of those types of projects.
Okay, Councillor Sanford, do you have a question?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. I'm just wondering from a procedural perspective if the BIA could have their meeting and then this could come back to potentially a special meeting of council. We do have a couple of dates before May 1st. I see that there's a deadline issue, but maybe there could be some more clarity on what the BIA wants to do and how they want to proceed. This could potentially come back.
Ms. Richardson, did you have comment on that?
Sorry, I was just going to say that would be another option, just because we didn't have another meeting scheduled until after the deadline. That wasn't immediately the direction that I considered, but if that's something that council would like to consider instead, that would be an option. We do have a finance committee meeting on the 21st, but I don't believe, although that is something I could review, that this would be something that could be done by the finance committee. So I think it would need to be a special council meeting.
Yeah, we would have to adjourn as the finance committee and reconvene as council, which arguably could be done. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. In terms of special meetings, we have two potential dates on our calendar that we could schedule a special meeting. The Tuesdays outside of that finance committee meeting. I just think it would be more comfortable if we were approving something that the BIA had actually reviewed and revised. And we do have options. We have two more options in April for a special meeting date if we want to convene.
Yeah, Ms. DeSoto, do you have perspective on this?
No, I agree with Councillor Sanford. That is a viable option. I think this was all potentially coming together this morning. So we proceeded with what was proposed and what was in the agenda package, but that is certainly a viable option to postpone till the BIA has a opportunity to review the budget and approve a different one should they wish.
Yeah, I lean towards feeling the same way. It wouldn't be that hard to schedule a short council meeting the day of our finance committee meeting, and we just have to be properly advertised, posted. Is that right? Yes, that's right. So not hard to do, and that gives the BIA businesses a little bit more time to review and give feedback to their board. I'm prone to postponing the motion until the, what was the date of the finance committee meeting?
April 21st.
And that's currently scheduled for 9 a.m.
I believe it's in the afternoon after the
Afternoon?
call, but I don't have my calendar in front of me.
Yes, the committee of the whole is at 9 a.m.
Okay,
Um,
and then finance is at 1?
Yes, my recommendation that you would just say prior to May 1st. So that leaves us the flexibility to choose any Tuesday that works. Ms. Richardson, I'm wondering if you could unshare your screen.
Of course.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's how we'll proceed. I'll put that motion forward and see what happens. So I would have to put the original motion on the table and then the postponing motion right away. If there's sort of a general, nobody's shaking their head or anything. Are there any other questions first for Ms. Richardson? I had one just for certainty of how the process works. So does each unit in a commercial building actually receive a tax notice, or is that incorporated into one tax notice that only the commercial landlord sees?
Sorry, Ms. Vandervoort, I see you shaking your head there. You might best know how these notices regarding the levy go out to your members.
Mayor Borman, so what we have been doing is we send the information to the landlord in a letter, and then they disperse it to their individual businesses in the building. And what we found over the last few years, a number of landlords do it differently. Some include it in their triple net costs, some ask for it in addition to, but any one of the businesses downtown can contact my office and ask for, clarification on what their landlord has been approached, what he is, what the information has been sent to him.
Great. Yeah, I'm just curious. It's been a number of years since I had a business on Main Street. I'm curious how transparent it is for the individual business owners within a commercial building.
They're certainly welcome to send it, to get in contact and ask for clarification from our office at any time. As time has gone on, it's been, as I said, it was interesting because I would get calls when I first started doing this and was sending it to everyone. The amount that they were being charged sometimes included an administrative fee from the landlord. So it became kind of difficult to, so it was determined a few years back that we would just send it to the property owner as it is on the property owner's commercial tax roll notice.
Right, okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none. Thanks both of you for
Thank you.
presenting at this time. So at this point, then I will move the council approve the downtown business improvement area 2020 budget as presented. And I'll move to postpone that motion until a later date prior to May 1st. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. I'll move the council give first reading to bylaw 2020-09, the downtown business improvement area tax rate bylaw.
Excuse me, Mayor Borelman?
Yes?
I don't think you need to move to the bylaw. The whole item's been postponed. So,
Okay, I was just going to postpone that motion as well, but I suppose you could just wait.
yeah.
Okay. Great, thanks everybody for that one. Move on now then to item G2. The supplementary assessment bylaw 2020-08. Ms. Richardson.
So if you'll bear with me, I'm just switching presentations. Is that showing up for everyone?
Not yet.
Okay, let me try this again. Better?
Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So the next item I'm here to talk about today is the Supplementary Assessment Bylaw 2020-08. Our recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to Supplementary Assessment Bylaw 2020-08. So as a reminder of what the supplementary assessment actually is, it addresses an increase in the value of a property that happens during the current tax year. So this happens when new construction is completed or occupied, or a major renovation or addition is completed on an existing home or building during the current tax year. In order to prepare supplementary assessments, council must pass the supplementary assessment bylaw authorizing that preparation prior to May 1st. And similar to my last agenda item, again, some deadlines have been extended by ministerial order, but again, this section was not one of the ones included. In conclusion, our recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to Supplementary Assessment Bylaw 2020-08, and I'm happy to address any questions at this time.
Thanks very much. If we could go back to the gallery view. Are there any questions at this time from members of council? Seeing none. So I just want to emphasize what you've noted, that this bylaw is entirely specific to assessments. Tax rate bylaw will come forward in the future, and that'll be a different conversation.
Correct. This is just to authorize the preparation of the supplementary assessments.
Right. Great. Seeing no questions then. Thank you very much. At this point, I'll move the council give first reading to Supplementary Assessment Bylaw 2020-08. Is there a discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Move the council give second reading to Supplementary Assessment Bylaw 2020-08. Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. I'll seek leave from council, go to the third reading of Supplementary Assessment Bylaw. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously, and I'll move the council give third reading Supplementary Assessment Bylaw 2020-08. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Moving on then to item G3, road closure bylaw 2020-05 for 12th and 3rd Railway Court. Ms. Wojtenko.
Hi, good morning, Council and Mayor. How are you guys?
Fine as peach fuzz.
Great. Okay, so you're gonna have to bear with me as well. I'm going to start my presentation. So. Great. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
And you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so I've got two road closure bylaws to present, one right after the other. And the first one is bylaw 2020-05, and it's for the portion of 12th Street and 3rd Avenue, which is also known as Railway Court. And this is an image showing the area in question. So the purple hatched area is the proposed road closure area. And the blue area with the lots, that is the owner of the lots who is proposing this application to council. Council has seen this image before. Back in January, February, we were under discussions, excuse me, with the landowner regarding an offer to purchase this area of the proposed road closure. And so we did execute that agreement in February, and we're proceeding forward primarily within those timelines, despite the kind of setbacks that we're having with the COVID concerns. So this road closure application that's being proposed would be to create a titled land, and then council would dispose of it at a market value. And that value was determined through the offer to purchase. And this would be one of the conditions that's in the offer to purchase that we did execute with that landowner. And so the legal address is lot 15 and 1617, block 66, plan 1095F. And the portion of roadway that you see there that we close, what the proposal is from the applicant, and this is detailed in that offer to purchase, is that the area in the purple hatch, the road closure, would be consolidated into those 3 existing lots. And then they would come forward, well, this is part of a subdivision application. The lots would be made larger and the lot lines slightly moved to create 3 more similar sized lots. And so this road closure bylaw that I'm presenting is slightly different than other bylaws that council sees. I think it's been a while since you've seen a road closure bylaw. And this is stated under section 22 of the MGA. And so road closure bylaw must be approved both by council and the Minister of Transportation. So the process is slightly different. If council gives first reading to the application today, I then have to create a package and circulate that to the Minister of Alberta Transportation and the utility companies. We need to notify in the newspaper of the proposed bylaw, and we need to give an opportunity for the public to give their feedback to council, and we do that through a public hearing. Then we need to send that public hearing package to the Minister of Alberta Transportation, and through the feedback that we get, council can decide how it would like to deal with that application, if it changes the bylaw, that sort of thing. So we do give that to the minister. If the minister then approves the bylaw, then it comes back to council and you can provide second and third reading of the bylaw should you choose. And at the same time, we'll be working on a subdivision application with the owner, as I mentioned, to consolidate those 3 areas, those 3 parcels and the road closure into 3 new lots. And part of that subdivision application that we'd be looking at is the details of upgrading the water and sanitary mains, the service connections to each lot, installing a fire hydrant, and then finally road and lane rehabilitation. And all of this would be at the developer's cost through the subdivision application. So the recommendation for today is that council give first reading to bylaw 2020-05, and we schedule public hearing for June 2nd, 2020. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Just on that, the last point, the scheduling of the public hearing. Of course, we all know that scheduling something even, that far out is still a little tentative. I know that in the city, for instance, they've made it clear that there won't be any public gatherings of any size until the end of June. So I suppose we'll just have to be prepared to reschedule the public hearing as we get closer to that date.
Yes, there's also been new provisions that just came out last week from the municipal government that changed the Municipal Government Act, in which we are able to hold public hearings over the internet, so similar forum to this. We're currently working through those details. As I understand, Mr. Soto can maybe provide more information, but definitely we can postpone public hearings should we need to, yes.
Yeah, and we have had some conversation about how we might do that. And if you could sort of give us the highlights of that, Ms. DeSoto.
Yes, we're considering a couple of options. Certainly the ministerial order that Ms. Wojtenko just referred to that came out from Minister of Municipal Affairs allows the municipality to set any process for collecting public information that it deems appropriate. So that includes just receiving written materials by email or regular mail. So we could set that. We could set up a teleconference town hall that we've seen the provincial government do, or we could set up a video link and do a Zoom type meeting like we're doing right now. So we are looking into the logistics of those, and we will advertise appropriately for what will work for us in this circumstance.
Great. So at the very least, people would be able to give their feedback through written submissions.
Correct.
And that's always the case. And under the new provincial guidelines, there's a number of other opportunities to allow people to speak directly to council through electronic means.
Correct.
Great, thank you. In sort of the same vein, Ms. Wojtenko, I'm wondering if you've heard any comments or feedback from any of the neighbors in that area or anybody in the community on this proposal since we discussed it in council in January.
I have not received anything since the discussion with council.
Great, thank you. And in regards to the mapping that you've shown us, there would be a requirement to move the portion of the trail that exists along what's currently 3rd Avenue.
Yeah, so I have an image, I think, on the presentation that I can share with you that kind of highlights that.
Yeah. Attachment 3.
Is that slide showing?
Yeah.
Great. So yes, as you mentioned, Mayor Borman, you know what? I'm going to turn on my highlighter. Oh no, sorry, laser pointer. There, I think you can all see that. So
Yeah.
here's the trail where it comes in approximately right now, this walkway. And so we have discussed with the owner of these lands who's offering to purchase and with their engineers that this pathway is very important for the town of Canmore. And through the subdivision process, we would need to work with them to come up with a design to ensure that this pathway is separated, safe, and redesigned in a manner that's satisfactory to the town.
Great. At that time, if there was inclination to do so, could we increase the vegetation between the new trail and what's likely to be new development on those lands?
That's something that could be looked at through the subdivision process, through conditions of subdivision. Landscaping is one of the things that we do look at through subdivision processes and design of public spaces.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there other questions from members of council? I see no questions. Okay, thanks for your presentation, Ms. Wojtenko. At this time then, I will move the council give first reading to bylaw 2020-05 and schedule a public hearing for June the 2nd, 2020. The discussion on that motion. I'll speak to the motion. I'm going to be interested to see what sort of feedback we do get from the community on this proposal. I believe that trail is, as you've noted in your presentation, it's a really popular trail, and people are used to walking past the creek and the waterway there, and that's part of the ambiance of that area. So seeing new development in that little patch may generate some pushback from some in the community. I'm just curious how that'll play out. But I'm certainly in support of moving through the approval process as it's established and taking this to a public hearing so that we can hear from the public. So I'll support this motion. Is there other discussion on the motion? See none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Wojtenko, and we'll move on to G4, which is you again.
Okay, this is the second bylaw that I'm going to propose to or present today, and I'm just going to share my screen again. Second presentation. Great, is that showing for everybody?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so this is road closure bylaw 2020-06, and this is for a portion of road plan 931-2238. And this road closure bylaw isn't coming forward from an applicant, but instead from the town itself, from administration. And it proposes to close a 1.47 hectare portion of road plan 931-2238, which is located the portion of the road plan. And again, I'm going to bring up my highlighter so I can show you on the map. This is the boundary of plan 931. Oh, I'm going all over the place here. That's 931-2238. So Palliser Trail is within this road plan, but it's not to close Palliser Trail. It's to close this grayed out portion of the road plan. Okay, and the purpose for closing this road is to dispose of unused portions of that road plan and to create titled land. And this titled land would continue to be owned by the town of Canmore for the purposes of development. And back in, this was December, council approved a plan to construct the new fire hall on this site. Okay, so you can see again here, this is Palliser Trail. This is the road coming in through and going to the cemetery. So it's quite a large portion of the area where we're closing the road, as well as the adjacent piece of land that the town already owns, which is titled land. And so council has told administration, let's go forward and do a fire hall design. So this is part of the preparation for preparing that site for development. First of the fire hall, and secondarily, council asked administration to explore these lands for future affordable housing. And I also just want to point out here on this slide, this little M piece of land, council did just see this not that long ago. We approached the landowners, it was the Holiday Inn, about acquiring this piece of land for road plan to secure this road both physically and legally for public access. And that has gone through. That road plan is now registered. So you see that here. So we have secured access to these lands. So I won't go over in too much detail again, the road closure bylaw process, but we do need to go through the same process as the other road closure bylaw, where it needs to be approved by both council and the minister. And so we are again going to need to have a public hearing of some sort so we can get input from the public. We'll need approval from the Minister of Alberta Transportation before we can bring it back to council for potential second and third reading of the bylaw. So our recommendation is that council give first reading to bylaw 2020-0. Oh, this should be -06. I apologize, that is an error. And schedule a public hearing for June 2nd, 2020. And I'm available if there's any questions.
Thank you again. Just in regards to the approval by the minister, and I had the same question in the last report, which I didn't ask, but is there any expectation that things are moving more slowly in Edmonton on these sorts of issues because of COVID, or do you expect things will move at the normal speed?
I haven't been in contact yet with the person who actually does the road closure bylaw process. I just got the contact of the person who is dealing with it. So I'll start preparing these packages, and then I'm going to ask if there's any expected timelines. But as of right now, I don't know the timelines.
Okay. And sort of as a tangent to this whole conversation, can you remind me if you know that is, I'm not certain what the current plans are for future expansion of the cemetery. Maybe Ms. DeSoto knows that, or is anybody, I'm just curious how future expansion of the cemetery may be affected by the work we're doing right now with the fire hall.
So I can jump in there. I know that was a consideration that was addressed when we first started to look at this parcel. Public Works has looked at the land that the cemetery currently has and the opportunity for expansion beyond that, and has said that they have, I think, over 100 years of life remaining in the land that's available. So we're satisfied that the fire hall could proceed to occupy the lands in question.
Perfect, thank you. Are there other questions, Councillor Comfort?
Yes, I just wondered if there were concerns about, at the moment, it's pretty ad hoc parking there, and the access is kind of higgledy-piggledy. I wondered if there are plans to clear that up, make it more direct, etc., now that we have the access to these lands.
Is higgledy-piggledy a technical word, Councillor?
I think I defer to Lauren on that one.
Mr. Soto, I can't answer too much more on the fire hall design. I'm helping with the just securing the lands themselves. Without Mr. Haynes here, I can't answer those questions. Maybe you can.
I'm sorry, Councillor Comfort, would you repeat your question for me then?
Okay, so I'll leave out higgledy-piggledy, but I'm just wondering about parking. You know, we have your ones who are buried there, and we're planning to be buried there too. And I wondered, at the moment, the parking is very kind of informal and disorganized, and also the access road itself. So I just wondered, are there plans going forward to sort that out, particularly now that the fire hall is going in there?
Okay, sorry. I thought you were talking about parking for the fire hall, but you're talking about parking for the cemetery. And certainly that is something we can look at as we look at design. The layout that was shown for the fire hall is very conceptual in nature. It's not final in any way. So certainly we can, as we proceed with enhancing that site for the fire hall, consider improving parking for the cemetery as well.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of council at this time? Seeing none, I thank you, Ms. Wojtenko and others. I'll then move that council give first reading to bylaw 2020-06 and schedule a public hearing for June 2nd, 2020. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And we will now move on to item H1. The Canmore Community Monitoring Report Review, Ms. DeSoto.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Borman, members of council. I as well have to share my screen here. Not sharing, is it?
Not yet.
Just one moment.
There you go.
There we go. Takes a few clicks. So thank you very much. I'll be making the presentation today on behalf of the Biosphere Institute. They had initially requested to be here to speak to their proposal. However, given that this was our first attempt at trying to manage an electronic meeting, we weren't certain about having too many guests on the call. So it was proposed that I present their material for them. So the recommendation, as you've seen in the report, is that council accept the Biosphere Institute's proposal to reallocate funding for the Canmore Community Monitoring Report in 2020 towards conducting a comprehensive review and recommendation for the future direction of the report by the end of the calendar year. Now, the Canmore Community Monitoring Report, or CCMR, as it's noted in the staff report, got its start over 20 years ago. In 1995, the town completed a growth management strategy to address double-digit growth challenges that were occurring at the time. And the strategy recommended that there be regular monitoring of the community's progress in managing that growth. And so in 1999, the inaugural Community Monitoring Report was produced. And the Biosphere has been contracted ever since to produce that report on a biannual basis. And they do that. Currently, the budget in 2020 is $19,000. And even though it's produced over a 2-year period, we pay annually approximately $19,000 for that report. So the Biosphere has proposed to use those funds to conduct a review of this report in 2020 in order that the report continues to remain relevant for both the town and the community moving forward. And generally, administration supports that proposal. And the points up on the screen now are essentially what the Biosphere is proposing to review, and they would do so in collaboration with the town. Just as note, it's the manager of community social development who generally oversees and supports the delivery of this report along with the Biosphere. So the elements that will be considered in the Biosphere's review, as I noted, are there, and they have been detailed further in the Biosphere's proposal and in the staff report. So from a financial impact perspective, we don't anticipate any new costs to conduct the review. However, as noted already, we would reallocate the existing $9,000 that's in the budget, $19,000, sorry, that's in the budget this year for production of the report towards completion of the review. And then that just, there were some alternatives considered and identified in the report. One was that we have administration complete the review, or we issue a request for proposals for a third party to conduct the review. And when we first started discussing this with the Biosphere, we potentially thought these were valid alternatives to consider. However, given the current workload associated with the COVID-19 health crisis, and specifically also with the manager of community social development's workload on closing the Parenting Center and opening the Family Resource Network, and also that the biosphere clearly has the working knowledge and the historical understanding of the evolution of the community monitoring report, it was ultimately decided that they are the best position to conduct the review. So with that, we're back to the recommendation, and I am happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much. I've been involved along with the CAO in some of these discussions with the biosphere, and you know, we've had some really good conversations with them, and I'm confident that the biosphere really understands the need here in Canmore, and has some really solid directions that they would imagine taking the monitoring report. So yeah, I'm happy to see this report come forward. Are there any questions for Ms. DeSoto, Councillor McCallum?
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Mayor Barman. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. So thank you for your presentation, Ms. DeSoto. In past, well, let me rewind. I agree with all of that you've said, Mayor Barman. The community monitoring report is something, as you know, that's very dear to my heart. It's this excellent pulse that we can check on our community every 2 years. That gives us an idea as to where things are going from every aspect of our community, sociological, environmental, economical, etc. My first question is with regards to when you would expect to see the next report coming forward. So what I've noticed in the last 2 reports is that they don't seem to be coming out very timely. So for instance, this year it was a 2018 report. We didn't get it until December of 2019. And so I'm wondering moving forward, how are we going to be addressing getting this report out every 2 years as we are anticipating it to come out?
Yes, and I believe Bruce Clegg from the Biosphere addressed the timeline a little bit when he presented to council in December or early January of this year, it might have even been. So a 2018 report would always come out the subsequent year. Certainly we would hope that it would come out by mid-year, but it takes till about the end of Q1 or even into Q2 of the next year to get all the data from the previous year. So that's partly why there's a lag. I can't recall exactly what was the reason that pushed it so late into 2019, but
Stats can.
Oh, is Stats can?
Yeah,
Well,
I would guess. Yeah.
Mr. Gleig also had some health issues that sidelined him for a while.
Oh, okay. I guess maybe that would, go ahead.
Sorry, just there is an intent, and this would be part of the review, to look at, rather than doing it in sort of a static every 2 year, to constantly update fact sheets as the data becomes available, because not all data is generated on an annual basis. Sometimes there's seasonal data, for example, in the wildlife coexistence information that we get, or when StatsCan releases their next set of data, we can update these fact sheets. So that's something we want to look at, is utilize open source data in a more meaningful and appropriate way, and potentially having these fact sheets online and accessible at all time, rather than producing a sort of written sort of large report on a biannual basis. But that would be something we would work with council, and it has to work for council, the town, and the community. So that is something that we really do want to engage people on.
Okay, and that's exactly what I was hoping that you were going to say, that it was going to transition, and that was going to be one of the things that were addressed within the review, because I think that that's really important. We either choose a moment in time, or we become more fluid in how we are producing that data for the public to consume. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Comfort.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Yeah, I just wanted to say that, or to ask, I guess, a big part of the importance of the document is the analysis of data. we could take all the data and make it public, but it's really, you can look at it and you go, well, what does that mean? You know, that we have X number of children under the age of 5 or whatever else. And if it's not put into context, if it's not interpreted, it's interesting, but it's not particularly helpful. So would that analysis part still happening through the biosphere or together with the town? And I just wanted to ask, we use a lot of tools to produce this document, like we used benchmarking in the past and census data from StatsCan and from the town. Would we still have to continue some of these measures in order to produce that report? So a census, a local census, for example?
Well, as council's aware, maybe I'll take that last question. We have almost ceased doing a local census. We haven't done one in a number of years, and so we've been deferring to the federal census to get our data from. Certainly we can and always have the option to put a census in the budget and to conduct a census, but we have not done one in a number of years. And I think that was something that Mr. Glegg was highlighting as a gap in information for him as he was producing the report. The analysis is one of those, I mean, I think we all know that you can look at data and interpret it. You know, it can be interpreted one by one individual and another way by another individual. So again, the way the community monitoring report has evolved was to have some of those indicators where there's arrows shown right within the monitoring report document where it shows it's either increased, decreased, or stayed the same. And it has moved away a little bit from actually interpreting what that means. If there's less children in the school, for example, you know, one person could look at that and say, oh, well, there's more children being homeschooled. Another person could look at it and say, well, there's less children in our community. So there isn't that ease of interpretation that is clearly been consistent, I guess, throughout the production and the various editions of that report. So we will be looking at that, and I think one of the first things we'll do is have a workshop with council to ensure that what is important to you in the production of that report gets worked into the review and future efforts to produce the monitoring you see valuable.
Great, thank you.
You know, just speaking of various pieces of data that one can collect and find interesting, I just the other day I was curious about the number of licensed dogs in the town of Canmore. So I dug in a bit and got that data point. We have 5,000 licensed dogs. 5,000 licensed dogs in this town. Woo, that's an interesting piece of data. I mean, there's far less number of kids below 18. Anyways, I have a question. So are we, and I don't recall if this has been part of the conversation to date, but are we imagining that this process will result in continued publication in, you know, as a paper document that's available online, or would it transition to a purely electronic format? Do you know, Ms. DeSoto?
I don't believe that that's been predetermined. That would be part of the review. As I was responding to Councillor McCallum's question, the desire and current thinking about best practices is to move towards an evolution of fact sheets that get updated when the data is available. So rather than waiting till we have all data available for all indicators and producing a written report, there could be an electronic version of fact sheets that are located all in one area, but each individual fact sheet would get updated as data is available. And that's sort of the thinking that's current best practice, but whether that's what we land on, that would all be part of the review.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions at this time from members of council? Seeing none, thanks for your report. So I will move the council accept the Biosphere Institute's proposal to reallocate funding for the Canmore Community Monitoring Report in 2020 towards conducting a comprehensive review and recommendation for the future direction of the report by the end of the calendar year. Discussion on that motion. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I'm happy to support this motion. The Canmore Community Monitoring Report in its current version has been with us for more than 15 years. And I can imagine that a revision as to methodology and to how it's produced and shared with the public is long overdue. This document and the contents of the document rather are really important to decision makers as well as nonprofits and other organizations within our town borders. And it would be a shame to cease its publication or to not allow it to update with the times. So I'd be happy to support this.
Yeah, as would I. This report has been an important piece of information or a source of information going back to the 90s when it was first initiated by the council of the day, as was noted in response to the concerns about the impact or effect of growth in the community. I refer to the report regularly in my job, and I'm not certain how many in the public do refer to the report frequently, but I think updating it and bringing it into today's world, if you will, is going to be a really positive step. And we will continue to have access to all of the information that's been accumulated over the last decades. And I'm hoping find it's an even easier document to refer to. So I'm quite supportive of moving forward in this direction. So the discussion from members of council. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on then to item H2, snow and ice control contract. Oh, Mr. Heel.
Morning, Mayor and Council.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Working out at home, I see.
I am, yes.
Great.
So thanks for having me here again this morning. I'm here to talk about the snow and ice control contract. So I'm just going to share my screen.
Great.
Okay. You okay there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm here to talk this morning about the snow and ice control contract award. And as I move through the presentation, just a reminder again that the acronym SNIC stands for Snow and Ice Control as we move through here. So, sorry. I'll start with the recommendation, which is that council agree to award a multi-year contract for snow and ice control services on Town of Canmore roadways to Volker Steven Highways Limited. A little bit of background on the contract and the relationship with Volker Steven. Snow and ice control on Town of Canmore roadways is contracted out. Volker Steven has been providing this service since 2005, and the current contract expires on July 31st of this year. We issued a public tender and it closed on January 27th, and there were 5 responses received to the public tender. So with the new contract, you can see the map on the right there. This is a public map. It's not easily viewable right now, but this is our roadway network divided into priorities based on the way the policy looks. So with the new contract, it will encompass the roadway network. It will be a 6-year term, and there will be options for 3 one-year renewals after this 6-year term is expired. Something a little bit different is incorporating key performance indicators to manage the contract and the service provider a little better. These KPIs, key performance indicators, will be focused on safety, the environment, customer service, and community engagement. So excluded from the contract, or the expectation from Volker Stebbing, would be the active transportation network, that is our paths, public sidewalks, transit stops, as well as public facilities, so Elevation Place, Civic Center, those types of places. And also excluded from the contract is provisional work. So by provisional work, we mean snow removal from the roadways. So again, clarifying removal versus plowing. Plowing moves it off to the side. Removal actually physically removes the snow from the roadways. Also excluded from this contract is the hauling of our street sweepings when we clean those up in the spring. What we did when we evaluated the proponents was we based 50% of it on price and 50% of it on a series of written responses. So on the pricing side, we included the retainer fee. This is the monthly fee, like a standby fee, if you will, for the contractor to have equipment available to us. We expect the contract to go from October 15th to April 15th annually. Also with regard to price is what we've called equipment call-out rates. So if we have a snow event and the trucks or the plows get deployed, we do get charged an hourly rate for the use of their equipment. Also included in the price, we asked for their pricing on materials. So salt, sand, and brine is what we typically use on our roadways. From the written responses perspective, there were some mandatory requirements like, are they insured? Do they carry WCB coverage? We wanted to take a look at their operational strategy. How do they plan to go about doing what we're asking them to do? We wanted to look at their health and safety profile as well as their corporate profile and their operating location, as that can affect their ability to respond. With regard to the results, we took a model that used the last 3 years of data. So we took the standby fees for the last 3 years. We took an average number of hours over the last 3 years for the equipment call out as they went out for snow events. And we also averaged out the materials used over the last 3 years. Once we got average base figures for each of those categories, we took the pricing supplied by each proponent and attached it to the base figures that we used. Volker Stebbing came in with the lowest pricing, substantially lower than the other proponents, and their written responses scored very well. So on a scale of 0 to 100, Volker Stebbing ended up scoring 86, just a little over 86%. The next highest we had a couple in that 60% category, and then some that were lower. So we did consider some alternatives when we put this RFP out. We asked for what we called all-in pricing, and that consisted of, we wanted to know, like, it was optional. We said to the proponents, you know, what if you supplied us with a fixed price for your standby fees and your call out services on a monthly basis? What would that look like? And excluded from the all-in pricing, though, was materials. There's so much variability with regard to strategy and whether it was difficult to include that. In the end, we are not recommending going with an all-in pricing model. We feel there is potential for service delivery shortcomings. If a contractor gives a fixed price, we think there's probably more oversight required on the contract. You know, if we are to amend the policy or our road system based on active transportation being incorporated into the road and the bus system being expanded, we thought there was maybe an opportunity there that we'd have to go back and renegotiate that fixed price. And in the end, there were minimal savings. Volker Stebbing, for example, their variable price that they submitted and their all-in price were very close. So they clearly had the data based on the fact that they are the incumbent, but we feel it's a better way to go with a variable model. Another alternative that we looked at was bringing the service in-house. So that would consist of the town of Canmore owning and operating its own plowing equipment, and also managing materials and storing those materials. Again, we didn't feel this was a recommended approach. The initial capital outlay is high. We don't have the budget for that at the moment. We don't have the equipment for that. And space, as you know, is limited, and we don't have that at the moment. And there are significant staffing and training considerations if we were to bring the service in-house. I'll touch on the financial impacts of the contract. So just a reminder that when we do our annual SNCC budget, we include the direct service costs. So we anticipate what are the costs of the contract that we are working with. And we also incorporate materials pricing. And we also incorporate provisional work, so removal of snow and hauling of sweepings. I will point out that in this chart, I have not included any provisional work. So this is just the contracted services related to the contract, the proposed recommendation here, and also the materials. I will note that if you look at the line for 2021, the contracted services line, for example, 215,000 versus the actuals for the previous years of 191, 176. This is a lower budgeted amount based on the fact that Volker Steven's monthly price was actually lower by about $2,000 than they are currently charging us. And the materials side of things, the budget has been bumped up a little bit. So you can see the actuals from the previous years are 190, 154, 129. There was an increase in the materials costs, and we also added a contingency for some conservatism when looking at a budget for materials. So that is has been raised. And with that, I would just like to carry on with the recommendation and open it to any questions.
Thanks very much, Mr. Heel. Quick question. In the past, I'm trying to understand the provisional costs in the budgets that council approved each year. Did those budgets include the provisional costs?
Yeah, the overall budget does encompass provisional work. We do anticipate that we will be doing more provisional work like snow removal. The road system is changing. I mean, in previous presentations, I've shown higher levels of snow that we've received over a fewer number of days in the past couple of years. So we do anticipate that the provisional work will increase going forward. But yeah, that was included in previous budgets.
Great, thank you. Councillor Comfort, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Borman. I just wanted to know briefly, did the town of Canmore ever do this in-house in the past?
Yeah. Yep. Before 2005.
But maybe they don't. So no, I just wondered what the historically what that record is.
Andreas, you were around at the time.
I was. I'll see what I can remember. Yeah, like you said, previous to 2005, it was delivered by municipal workers. At that point, we were in negotiations to purchase the lands where Volker Steffen's currently housed, and so we had an opportunity to piggyback on the provincial contract, or I believe at the time we also the equipment we had were close to being a situation where they needed to be replaced. So we had to make that decision. Do we reinvest, or do we piggyback on the provincial contract? At the time we were purchasing that lot down at the bottom of Elk Run Boulevard. And at the council today decided to piggyback on the provincial contract.
I can speak firsthand to that because that was my first term on council. And I remember the discussions quite well. I recall Councillor Bailey particularly, may he rest in peace. He was fairly adamant in his position, but as Mr. Comeau's mentioned, the council, admin did quite a comprehensive analysis of alternatives, and council certainly preferred to move forward with the Volker Steffen approach. And from my perspective, that was a good decision of council in 2005.
I just wondered, do they, I believe they hire locals or offer some of the positions to locals, do they not?
They do. I know that the bulk of the people working there at the moment are local residents.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Sealy, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Yeah, just in regards to active transportation, provisional work, and hauling and sweeping, wondering how this is going to be managed. I'm assuming the town is going to do most of it, but would there be an opportunity for local contractors?
Yeah, so currently the town manages, the Streets and Roads Department with the town manages the quote unquote active transportation network. So we do clearing of bus stops and all paths. And I mean, we are looking at some options as to how we can look at that going forward, how we can manage that going forward. Does it make sense to keep doing it like that? But that is not included as part of the service required by the contractor for the roadways.
Maybe I can also add in, Councillor Sealy, is I think your one question was about the provisional work, and that is delivered, orchestrated by us, but the services are provided by a number of contractors in town that go beyond just Volker Stefan as well. So a lot of the other large contractors are participating in that work.
I'll point out too that it's a little bit ad hoc in nature, and that we do it as it's required based on the considerations outlined in the policy. So we don't have a static number that says, you know, when we get a windrow of a certain height that we remove snow. We, you know, the downtown, for example, might see a little bit more provisional work provided than other areas just based on visitorship and usage. But we do, yeah, we do that sort of as needed, on an as needed basis.
Just for my understanding, it's not clear to me, the monthly standby fee, is that actually incorporated in the contracted services?
Yes.
Right, so that's an all in. Thank you. Are there other questions from members of council?
So just to point out, or to clarify there, John, the standby fee is one charge, and then if we get a snow event and the equipment goes out, we get charged hourly for those plows. In addition to the standby fee.
Right, but and all of those anticipated costs are incorporated under your projected budget?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Are there questions from members of council? Seeing none, thanks for your presentation today, gentlemen. With that, I'll move the council authorize administration to enter into a multi-year contract for snow and ice control services on town of Canmore roadways with Volker Stefan Highways Limited. Speaking to the motion, I will support the motion. I feel that feel strongly that we've received very good service from Volker Stefan since we went to this method in 2005. I know every winter when we have a big event, there's anxiety or sometimes anger in town around how our roads and sidewalks are cleared. But given the vagaries of winter weather and all of the complexities of managing a pretty vast network of roadways and sidewalks and whatnot, I really believe we're getting excellent service from Volker Stefan. And the fact that their bid was significantly lower in costing than the competitors was also really encouraging to hear. And as has been noticed or noted, the number of the Volker Stefan employees are also town of Canmore residents. So for all of those reasons and more, I'll happily support the motion. Other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Heel. Moving on now to item H3, Canmore Canassus Community Tourism Strategy Follow-Up. Ms. McLeod.
Good morning, Your Honor, Mayor and Council. Let me see if I can get this done correctly. You should be seeing the presentation right now.
Yeah.
Great. Glad to see that working. So good morning and welcome to Technology and Zoom Council meetings.
Yeah.
So I need to make sure that I'm clicking on the right screen here. So this morning I'm bringing to Council 2 recommendations around the Tourism Canmore Kananaskis bridging document. And a reminder that this bridging document was developed based on the tourism strategy, community tourism strategy developed by Tourism Canmore Kananaskis. And there were a number of recommendations in that document that aligned with the town of Canmore as the lead. And so based on those items, this bridging document was developed. We have 2 recommendations for council this morning. One, that council accept the tourism bridging document for planning purposes as presented. And one of the items would require council's approval at this meeting, and that council approve a 1-year funding support in 2020 for Tourism Canmore Kananaskis based on $45,000 to be funded from the Economic Development Reserve for 2020, and direct administration to create a partnership agreement that ties this and any future funding to TCK's delivery of sustainable outcomes as outlined in the approved tourism strategy. Just to remind council that we made 2 motions in the past in 2019. One, that council direct administration to develop this bridging document, and 2, that we direct administration to work with TCK to create a roundtable that is representative of the broader community and the triple bottom line. And this was outlined in their strategy. Oops. I'm going a little faster than my slides. So the Tourism Canmore Kananaskis plan was approved for planning purposes on May 7th. On the same date, council had different motions. With the COVID-19 pandemic impact on the community and around the world, tourism has come to a screeching halt. And as we come through the community emergency, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. As we come through the community emergency, a strong partnership with TCK and the tourism industry will be required to support the community and businesses in the economic recovery. As we see, it's quite unprecedented, the amount of businesses that have been shut down and are currently not able to operate or provide services, and as well the great diversity we have seen from our business community in how they're adapting to these new realities. We followed up with through a number of internal and external stakeholders to discuss the bridging document and the recommendation in it. And the bridging document was shared with the chair of TCK, Andrew Shepherd, and the previous executive director, Dave Rodney, on 3 different occasions to provide feedback. And we assume that that was shared with their board as well. So in the community tourism strategy, there are 5 overarching goals that they have outlined. And under those goals, there are a number of sub recommendations. So their 5 overarching goals is to acknowledge the importance of tourism in our community and commit to becoming proactive in its development, building community-wide trust, collaboration, engagement, and accountability in order to strengthen the social infrastructure supporting tourism, to create a sustainable framework for tourism development that will ensure long-term economic, social, and environmental viability, develop and promote outstanding visitor experience that will position Canmore Kananaskis as the destination of choice for those seeking to immerse themselves in authentic mountain lifestyle and the fast wilderness, and improve the physical infrastructure for Canmore Kananaskis to enhance visitor experience prepared for growth. So the tourism bridging document outlines a number of recommendations where the town would be the lead or partner in these. So only those actions have been pulled out from the original document. And now you'll see the numbering in the document is a bit off and might not be consecutive, but that was based on only focusing on those items that were the responsibility of the town or where in which we were a partner. The initiatives, action items, priority and cost, lead and timelines as outlined in the community tourism strategy. So these were not developed by the town, but these were in the original strategy. And so we put in there, what would the budget impact be for the town of Canmore? And what does this mean to administer the recommendation? So the timeline, what's actually viable for us to take on in the 10-year timeline as outlined in the strategy. So for council consideration, one of the items mentioned in the bridging document is to secure project funding in the short term to launch key initiatives and see provincial and municipal grant funding for top priorities initiatives in the action plan. So we proposed the development of a partnership agreement with TCK focused on the delivery of initiatives that align with the town of Canmore and approved tourism strategy surrounding sustainability objectives, such as the development of the tourism roundtable, visitor education, coexistence with wildlife, and social and environmental sustainability. I recognize that operating funding was a key objective for TCK at the time of the development of this strategy. So the recommendation we're bringing forward is for council to approve a 1-year funding support in 2020 for Tourism Canmore Kananaskis based on 54,000, sorry, my dyslexia is shining through there, to be funded from Economic Development Reserve and direct administration to create a partnership agreement that ties this and any future funding to TCK deliver on sustainable outcomes. So when recommendations require funding to be executed, they will be brought forward as part of the normal budgeting process, as this one is for 2020 and not currently in our budgeting process. We're bringing it forward at this time. I will say that we did research a number of DMOs and various funding structures that they have available to them. And it varies from $0 to hundreds of thousands of dollars, all tied to various outcomes. For example, the county of Grand Prairie or the region in that area, I think their funding is $1.27 per capita. And then they have, in addition to that, a DMO, and they have 2 different boards operating these funding mechanisms. In other communities, that could have been, sorry, I'm trying to bring the report in front of me. So in others, it's the management of a local or in-town visitor information center that is tied to those funding obligations. And I don't think any of them have the same mechanism or the same process. So it was hard to really create a recommendation because I think every municipality deals with the priorities of tourism differently and how they fund them differently. But we recognize that currently TCK their focus is on the marketing component. And as such, we looked at what we previously did when Tourism Canmore Kananaskis was Canmore Business and Tourism. And for the marketing piece, the town funded them in the amount, I think $56,000 was to go towards marketing that aligned with town objectives at that time. I did want to share with council an alternative as a request from TCK. So Tourism Canmore Kananaskis would prefer we consider an operating fund in the amount of about $6 per capita, which would be about $108,000 for 2020. This could be paid for out of the Economic Development Reserve, which currently sits at about $500,000. We did not support that recommendation at this time, mainly because of the pandemic and recognizing that our community is diverse and the needs for support during this time will be diverse. And we still need to better understand where we as a town play a role and how we can play that role. and would prefer to develop an economic development recovery plan and determine what the use of those funds or of the reserve could be, rather than just allotting that to one organization at this time. So that's it for my presentation. Council has any questions?
Thanks very much, Ms. Mchat. Just on that last point, so an economic development recovery plan, which clearly is a tool we're going to need to develop, that would be developed in partnership with the business organizations like TCK or
Absolutely.
the new Canmore Business Alliance.
Yeah, so we have been meeting weekly with the Canmore Business Alliance to discuss the business needs survey, how we can best respond to those needs. And based on those conversations, we are developing a recommendation that will be brought to council at one point in time to what that might look like for our business community, or what the recommendations would be in order to address the variety of needs currently in our business community.
Great, and just a thought in regards to future planning. I've never personally been comfortable with the per capita metric. I mean, we don't do a local census very often. So that data doesn't change very frequently, and we still aren't certain in our ability to have an exact number of residents that includes non-permanent residents. So I don't know if that's the best.
I'll just highlight in the report itself for moving forward, there is a recommendation for 12.5% of the business registry revenues. So
That's
again,
right.
this is the motion for 2020. Moving forward, as part of the normal budgeting process, we would bring a percentage process forward.
Yeah, and I was going to say that certainly makes more sense to me to go to something that's clear and simple to understand. And the business registry revenues are black and white. So if we're going to tie future funding to some metric, that's certainly a good metric to use. You know, and when I'm looking at I like the model that you outlined in your report from Lethbridge. And it does note that the local destination marketing fund, they do collect 2% from member hoteliers. But the city provides their funding with a funding agreement to run the visitor information center, event attraction, marketing, etc. So I like the idea of tying funding to some specific project or activity, which by and large is what we did in the past with Canmore Business and Tourism as well. So I think there's a lot of really good direction in the bridging document to that effect. I don't know if councillors have any questions. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Ms. McLett, the comparators that you gave us that refer to per capita funding, how many of those would have a similar organization or get their revenue from business registry licensing? Because to me, per capita funding and business registry licensing are two quite different things.
So none of them, all of them are tax funded if they get money from the municipal government. It is funded through tax revenue.
Okay, so our
Or
model,
at least for the ones we called.
yeah, so our model would be quite different in the sense that the revenue that we collect comes through business registry, and it's not a per capita funding per se because it's not based on tax revenue. So this is interesting because, you know, we have a quite a different model, and I think we should phrase it differently than per capita funding, just because we have a very different model. So,
and I would agree with that, and that's what our moving forward model is for this year. What we've said is if we have a fixed amount coming from a reserve, how did we come up with that calculation? And so that's how we came up with that calculation. And then we looked at what we previously have done for CBT.
And I think it's important to inform the community that this is a model that we use and that this is through the business registry licensing fees that, again, support business as opposed to per capita funding. So thank you.
And Councilor McCallum has a question, I know, but at this point, it's also worth noting that the business, the Economic Development Reserve is entirely funded by businesses. So the businesses, through their licensing fees, fuel the reserve, and then that reserve then goes back to support the business sector. So there's a nice tight circle on that. Councilor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Thank you, Ms. McClett, for your presentation. I just had a question with regards to the bridging document in Goal 1.5, where we talk about the proposed $3 per capita. What I'm trying to understand is, so it says here, proposed $3 per capita, 54,000 coming from ECDEV reserve for 2020 and 12.5% of business registry revenue. So are you proposing
Subsequent years.
Okay, so is it together? So in subsequent years, will it just be 12.5% or will it be 54,000 plus 12.5%?
So that would 12.5% is the recommendation for moving forward, and that would then be brought forward through our normal budgeting process for 2021, 2022 budgeting process.
Okay, all right.
And
so
again, that might look a little bit different given the pandemic, and recognizing that we might see a reduction in business registry revenues as a result of the impact that the pandemic is having on our business community.
Yeah. All right, I just wanted to clarify that because it sounded like in the second year it was both. Thanks so much.
Just in regards to that same point, under number 5 on goal 1, I've been struggling with that direction as well. And I did have a conversation yesterday with Ms. McClett. We're dealing with this year separately, and then there's recommendations here in the bridging document for future years. And the suggestion is 12.5% of the business registry revenue in subsequent years. I'm not certain that that's the right amount. I think, frankly, we should have a conversation about around more funding going to TCK in future years. But I'm taking some comfort from the last part of that recommendation, which is subject to approved funding agreement. So the 12.5% of business registry revenue that's being recommended in the bridging document would be subject to approved funding agreements. So there's a couple of things I'm comfortable with leaving that in the bridging document, because it implies that A, we will be writing or coming up with an agreement that will be negotiated between town and TCK and presumably other business organizations. So we'll be able to tie whatever funding that we are able to provide directly to certain deliverables. And I would think that through these funding agreements, that recommended amount of 12.5% of the business registry revenue could be increased. So it's not a hard and fast number that as a result of this bridging document. Do you think I'm interpreting that or reading that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, we have a line in there that says that we will review those levels biannually and as part of our normal budgeting process. And again, it's hard to say what will work given our current situation in around kind of a pandemic lockdown, and to see the trickle-down effect on the business community as a whole. And I recognize TCK, currently their membership, they have 18 hotels, I think, as their membership. And when they market the community, they market it broader, right? And everybody benefits as a result of the work that they're doing. That's going to need to be strategic. That's going to need to be staged and to give some considerable thought to what that might be. When we know that we've hit kind of a halfway point, or when we know what reopening might look like. And I don't think we're there yet. But that also means that when we see the impact of the business community, what that might mean for the business registry revenues, and of course those revenues also fund 2 full-time staff currently in the budget that's associated with that. And there is a large amount of work that is currently being done kind of in a COVID response. So balancing out those needs for what the impact could be in 2021 is also things that we need to consider as we, prepare that planning stage. So there's so many balls up in the air right now. It's hard to say what that might look like.
Councillor Hillstead has a question just before I hand the mic to him. This is a very unusual year. Let's hope it's the only year in our lives that's like this, but it's very unusual. And so we can't plan and we can't do the normal sort of work that we do year to year. So we have to get through this year. We have to figure it out. But I'm wanting to know, I'm hoping to have certainty that as soon as it becomes a reasonable discussion to have, we'll have a discussion about what might constitute an appropriate funding level from the town of Canmore through the active dev reserve or through the business registry fees to TCK to do the work that we're partnering with them to do. I don't think in the long run, 50,000 a year is going to cut it. But that's a conversation for another day once we get through current COVID situation. Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Thank you, Ms. McClett, for the presentation. With regard to the economic development recovery plan, do you have any examples of what that could or would entail?
There's a number of things that we have initiated already, and one of them was a business needs survey for us to understand what are the immediate needs and what do businesses feel their needs are in the future. So that helps us advocate to different levels of government or seek funding sources that might help with those things. We have started a business webinar series to kind of unpack all these programs that are out there and to help business owners, again, understand what are these tax incentives? How do I even apply for them? What do I do with my staff, the HR side of things? Or even I have a lot of immigrant staff, and what is my employer responsibility? It's not as simple as I just lay them off, right? There's other levels of government that are involved in that process. So as we find ways to help our business community maneuver through that, that's kind of our immediate response. We are currently also calling back about 364 businesses who indicated they wanted a call from economic development, and kind of working through, okay, so immediately these were your concerns. Are there programs that will meet your needs, and what new issues have arisen? And again, that helps us communicate with different levels of government and then look at what our programming could be for the town. And again, that's a bigger discussion than probably for this council meeting. But one of the things that council did was indeed the deferral of tax and utilities. That was a big piece of feedback we got from our business community, and council was very quick to respond to that. And thank you for our manager of finance who brought that forward, even without knowing that data, right? So there's stuff that we intuitively know as a town because we've had that experience through the 2013 floods, and there's things that are very different because it's not loss of facilities that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a pandemic and a provincial edict that has shut down the majority of our, specifically our tourism industry at this point.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Trying to keep an eye on the clock while we do this, but I guess we got some time yet. In regards to the bridging document, which council is being asked to approve for planning purposes, and I appreciate that for planning purposes is a fairly broad approval. But there's something in goal number 3 in section 7, which I just want to chat a bit about. So that's in regards to researching the indicators and effects of potential over tourism in areas of Canmore, Kananaskis, and mitigate negative impacts. So there's 4 recommendations there, including identifying indicators of over-tourism and identifying the carrying capacity of the region, et cetera. And that's in the priority and cost. And I know this is all informed through the strat plan, the strategic plan that TCK approved some time ago. It's noted as medium in both priority and cost. I would like to think that we could do that. I think that's a higher priority, should have a higher priority. We're not changing the TCK strategic plan at this point, I know, but I don't know how to introduce that into the conversation at this time.
So Mayor Borman, what I will say is that the recommendation that's currently in there also speaks about a pre-step that was supposed to be brought to council, but has been put on hold at present time due to the COVID-19 response and priority setting that administration is working on. So I think there's a pre-step to even researching those indicators and effect of tourism and putting those thresholds that needs to come before this process. And I don't know if Ms. Cottle wants to speak to any of that, but that's a recommendation outside of the scope of this plan, this bridging document.
Ms. Cottle? I don't think she's there.
He's here.
Oh, here she comes.
I'm here. Just takes a minute for Sarah to turn me on the camera. Yes, we had originally had something that we were going to bring forward at the same time that really was a community engagement, larger conversation around what it means to be a tourism-based community. But really, this isn't the time to be holding community conversations. And so clearly some more thought and effort will need to be put into what that looks like and when we bring it forward. So I don't know if that necessarily helps answer the question. I do think you can still move forward in approving this document for planning purposes. And then that next step now will just be part of the planning before we get to some of those other, some of the indicators in the section that you're referring to, Mayor Barman.
Great, that's perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you. Other questions, Ms. McLeod, specific to the bridging document? I did share offline one thing with Ms. McLeod yesterday, which again was ensconced within the Tourism Canmore Kananaskis strategy that was approved some time ago. And that's in regards to the park planning for Bighorn country that at the time of the writing of that strategy, the government, provincial government, were still talking about developing new recreation country up north of here, but the current government scrapped that. So we have sort of a stale reference in the bridging document to something that won't happen, at least not under the current government. Regardless, on the report itself and the conversation, you had indicated that there's currently the projection for year-end 2020 year-end balance in the Economic Development Reserve is $500,000. That's without factoring in any licenses that are not renewed, and we're certain to see a number of licenses not renewed. I don't know if we have any.
Yeah, so that's not just a renewal. We currently have invoiced for renewals. There's a number of them that have not been paid to date. And so that's about 31% of our current invoices in the current budget have not been paid for. And if those are not paid, we will need to access reserve funding to cover the economic development budget for 2020. We hope that that's not the case, but that's also something that's playing in the background at present.
Do you have any number to put to that? What's the total financial impact of those licenses?
Yeah, so just bear with me as I pull it up.
I think it's 132,000.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
So the likelihood or expectation is that there'll be $130,000 less going into the coffers than was projected a year ago.
And that's hard to say, right? We don't know where those businesses are at or how affected they are by the COVID-19 shutdown. Not all businesses have shut down. Some are doing their work remotely from home. And there are a few businesses that are coming in new. And so our rule of thumb has been, if you're starting a business now, that's a cost that you need to expect and be part of your business planning. Same as we have seen a high cancellation of our temporary licenses, which is also a significant piece of our budget due to cancellation of weddings and events. And some of them are, as we move into canceling 60 days out and the provincial restrictions remain strict, we'll see more of those coming over time. I mean, and that's outside of their control. So.
Great. Ms. Cottle?
Yeah, I'd just add to that, it's not uncommon for licenses to be unpaid at this time. Ms. McClett can speak to it better than I can, but the fact that there's licenses remaining outstanding right now is common. And so there's always some effort and work done by her and her team to remind people to pay those and to get those outstanding invoices resolved. So the fact that we have some amount unstanding isn't uncommon. It's just the unknown of how many of those, what the impact of these closures will be and how many businesses will ultimately be able to pay them or reopen. So what the outstanding number means is just a bit different, but the fact that we have an outstanding number isn't necessarily a cause for concern yet.
Right, so that would be typical at this time in a year.
Probably. Normally we'd be sending out reminders right now. We have opted to postpone that for now, given that most businesses are currently not operating and we don't want to add to that stress piece. And we'll probably do that later in the year.
We better have a look and see if Councillor Seeley's paid his license this year, because he's often scofflaw. Okay, somebody else had a question? Councillor Comfort.
I have a question, but I haven't quite formed it yet. But it seems premature to put plans in place before we really know the long-term effects of the current crisis. So do we have the capacity to be nimble in pivoting to something else if more things develop, if more the situation develops or stagnates, as the case may be, and like a plan B or C or D, kind of like that. And also, this isn't related to the bridging document specifically, but I'm hopeful that other plans for INEC Dev are going to proceed, that we're not sort of staking our whole Mazuma on tourism.
I think when this happened, I had to think of you, Councillor Comfort, when we did the approval of the economic development strategy, and one of your comments then was, I hope you can be nimble to the changing economy and demands. And so that happened, and we had to adjust quite rapidly. So we did postpone some of our programming that we had scheduled to launch, mainly because we needed to assess how to better support the businesses now. And then we'll reassess what that means moving forward. That's not a bad, one of the programs is not a bad program to do in a recovery mode, Currently, we don't know what that looks like, what recovery mode is. We can plan for that as best we know, and we have some good information behind us from previous emergencies that have happened in our province and learnings from those things that can help us create plans, and we can adjust accordingly as things change. And right now they're changing sometimes by the minute, and other days there seems a bit more breathing room. We'll adjust accordingly.
I imagine that there will be different sorts of support for business, large and small, coming from the feds and the province, I would think. So that would change what happens.
Yes.
Thanks for your presentation, Elmer.
Other questions from members of council? Councilor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you, Ms. McClett. I just wanted to ask, outside of 2.3, which is under goal 5, are there any other mentions to tourism and housing and the provision or attendance to or involvement in housing in general?
Not to my recollection. It is one of their main points, an area that they feel the tourism industry needs to be actively involved in, looking for solutions and partnering on those. But no, I don't know of any other recommendations in the report directly as it relates to the town at this point of time.
So were there any in terms of your time spent with TCK in the creation of this document, were there any discussions about how part of that triple bottom line approach and the social license that's being sought for, that there will be an ability for the tourism industry to be more transparent and be able to be informative to the community as to what kind of housing opportunities they are providing for their staff now and into the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel that their overarching strategy does speak to their need to be more transparent and about building that social license with the community and developing opportunities to develop that dialogue. And so the community roundtable being one of those opportunities for them to engage not just tour operators, but people from diverse backgrounds and with diverse opinions in a conversation about what does tourism in Canmore mean and look like, and how do we move forward in that conversation. So definitely something their plan recommends. They have approved it in their board, so our hope is that they will continue to implement those recommendations as they move forward.
Okay. I would say that out of the document in general, that's the one piece that I would find underwhelming. But I understand that we're in a different point in time right now at this moment than we were when this was written. So yeah. Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time from members of council? Seeing none. Thanks very much, Ms. McClett and Ms. Cottle, for your presentation. So at this point, I will move that council accept the tourism bridging document for planning purposes as presented. I'll support the motion. I think the work that's gone into developing the bridging document has been really great. More recent times have put a very different cast on everything, but stepping back from the current COVID situation, the bridging document is very descriptive of what we should be doing, what we need to be doing to work with our community to strengthen our economy and to keep the one sector strong, and to encourage through similar work other sectors. There's bits and pieces within the bridging document that I I would, tighten up or embellish a bit, but by and large, the bridging document is a good, in my opinion, a good plan for moving forward and directing future planning. So I'm happy to support the motion. So other discussion on that motion from members of council? Anyone? Okay, then I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. I'll now move that council approve one-year funding support in 2020 for Tourism Canmore Kananaskis based on $54,000 to be funded from the Economic Development Reserve for 2020, and direct administration to create a partnership agreement that ties this and any future funding to TCK's delivery of sustainability outcomes as outlined in the approved tourism strategy. And for that motion, I will propose an amendment through an amending motion. I don't know if Ms. Hyde has that ready to share.
I do. I do have that to share. I'm clicking. I don't know why it's not sharing. Let me try again.
Sure. Well, it's a fairly simple amendment. We'll give, there we go, something's happening. Okay, so the amending motion is the first bit there, move that council amend the motion by deleting based on 54,000 and inserting the words of 100,000 in its place. So the motion then would read, the council approve one-year funding support in 2020 for Tourism Canmore Kananaskis of $100,000 to be funded from the Economic Development Reserve for 2020, and direct administration to create a partnership that ties this and any future funding to TCK's delivery of sustainability outcomes as outlined in the approved tourism strategy. So in speaking to the proposed amendment, I think now more than ever, we have to respond to the changing situation in our community. And this would be one very concrete way in which the town can help with coming efforts to rebuild our economy and support the business community. I know that we'll be discussing a number of other opportunities in the near future and ways that we can use the town's resources to support our economy, to support our businesses, small and large. But this year is going to be particularly challenging for the business sector. And once the situation actually changes and the health authorities give the word that people can start moving about more freely again and start traveling if they want. And I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm optimistic it will happen. We're going to need, the town of Canmore, we're going to need to mount a very comprehensive marketing plan in order to reach out and to share with our visitors, our future visitors, and the current situation in Canmore and welcome visitors back to town. And I think it's clear that TCK, Tourism Canmore Kananaskis, is best positioned to deliver this marketing. Really, destination marketing is their primary piece of work. And I'll note that the Economic Development Reserve is entirely funded by the businesses that we're now wanting to reach out and support through this mechanism. So the source of the funding is the businesses that we know we're going to have to help. honestly, I don't know if $100,000 will suffice to do the kind of marketing and outreach that I think we're going to need to do, but I would encourage the rest of council to support this amending motion. Discussion on the amendment. Councillor Seeley.
Support this amendment by increasing financial support, I believe shows a spirit of cooperation and community partnership. And this increase also aligns with TCK's request to provide important additional funding during this difficult period. I think is important. I encourage my other colleagues to also support this amendment.
And I should note that at this occasion, we're just suggesting a number that's not informed by any formula or anything. And again, I feel that this is a very unusual year. And I did say earlier during the discussion period that I much prefer tying any funding to measurable criteria or data, like a percentage of the business registry funding, and also tied directly to an outcome, rather than just handing money over without knowing what it's going to be used for. And in this, with this, the wording of this motion, the funding would be used to deliver the marketing that the community requires. So it's very specific in its use. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I'm just wondering, with the unknowns that we have about when we will be able to resume operations, when we become business as usual, if we increase the funding in this particular year, 2020, and that funding may or may not be used efficiently in 2020, would there be an opportunity to use that funding more efficiently in 2021 if that's where we're going with our timelines? I know that it is a sense of goodwill to the tourism community to allocate these fundings in 2020, but would this funding be more valuable in the coming year? And how would we evaluate what we do in the coming year if we commit these dollars in this particular year? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah. Firstly, I wouldn't characterize this as goodwill. I think this is an important part of our work to support the business community by directing funding to projects, delivery that we know is going to be critical. So this is not a gesture of goodwill. This is very, very directly using some of the town's resources to help our business community. If things are not able to change in 2020, they'll change at some point, and this fund will be available for that time when it becomes appropriate to reach out and market our tourism sector and our community again. So whether the funds are used over the coming 6 or 8 months or whatever, or held until it's appropriate to start that project delivery is not that relevant. There would be, in 2021, there'll be another collection, if you will. I mean, the Economic Development Reserve will be receiving new funding in 2021 through business registry. So it's not like this is a balance of money that once it's gone, it's gone. It'll be replenished. Not certain how it'll be replenished entirely because of change in business structure, but yeah, I would.
My point is that this is dollars directed specifically at marketing through Tourism Canada, Canmore Kananaskis. It's a marketing agency, and the dollars that are allocated would be specifically for marketing. I would assume. However, we don't know when we're going to be able to resume. And so when would these dollars be most effective? It would be most effective when we're ready to resume. So if they're put in place now, and then they can be used in the next 6 months or whatever timeline we're looking at. I just want to make sure that we allocate the funds effectively for that organization.
Sure. Councillor McCallum, did you have a question or point?
Yes, I did actually. Thank you, Mayor Barman. So just to the point that was brought up, I would like to understand. So this motion states that the $100,000 or the previous, the $54,000 is tied directly to a partnership that provides sustainability outcomes as outlined in the tourism strategy. As I read it, that isn't marketing. So are we then proposing to boost this amount for marketing farther on down the year, or for the motion that's proposed in front of me?
The money would be used to deliver sustainability outcomes.
As outlined in, okay, all right, because we went on a tangent of talking about a marketing effort, and I wasn't sure if you were tying that money to the marketing effort or to the sustainability outcomes.
Yeah, and bear in mind that administration would have to create a partnership. That's part of the motion.
Yes.
And administration would have to agree that marketing, once COVID-19 is not in our face, marketing clearly would become part of building sustainable outcomes. So the discussion on the amending motion?
Yeah, I still have another question, Your Worship.
Yeah.
So my second question is, so somebody's laughing and I don't know who that is.
Sorry.
Now it's me laughing. So I agree. We have an opportunity to use resources to help our business community. And I don't necessarily disagree with this this form of providing assistance to the business community. My other question is, how we're using the business community as a sort of a global word, but you need to be a member of Tourism Canmore Kananaskis to be able to benefit then from perhaps, or be a member of, to benefit from this $100,000 infusion.
No.
Because it feels, and I'm actually, it doesn't feel that way. It could be seen as picking winners and losers within the business community.
Councillor, that's not at all how
Okay, all right. I just want to, and I'm not saying that that's coming from me. I've just heard it from one or two other people, and it is a fair point.
You'll recall after the flood, when things started settling down, some of the business organizations, I think CB&T and the BIA organized a massive campaign in the city. We're open, come on back. And it would be in that nature that I would expect to see any marketing. It's not, come and stay at this specific hotel or eat at this specific restaurant. It's the town of Canmore is ready to welcome.
Open for business again. Yeah. Okay, but I still don't understand then, just to rewind to your previous statement, and maybe I'm just not getting it. This motion states that this $100,000 is to be funded from the ECDEV reserve and directing administration to creating partnership ties with regards to this tourism strategy and the bridging document. But that doesn't say marketing specifically. The sustainability outcomes as outlined in the approved tourism strategy aren't all marketing. They're sustainability, which isn't necessarily marketing. So I'm wondering if you would like to perhaps amend your motion to direct those. If you're thinking that this money should go to marketing, then it should be explicit in the motion.
The original motion, but prior to this amendment, it's read the same way. The only change I'm proposing is increasing the amount of money. I'm not proposing any change to what administration does in regards to that funding. They're still being directed to create a partnership that ties this funding, whether it's 54 or 100K,
Yeah,
and any future funding to certain delivery of sustainability outcomes.
which may or may not be marketing.
But administration will be creating that partnership.
Okay,
So that's in the motion, that's very clear to me. In the motion, we're directing admin to create a partnership that ties this funding and
Yeah.
any future funding to
for
TCK
to
delivery.
sustainability outcomes.
Right.
Okay, all right, but all right, I just wanted to be clear because we were talking about marketing and now but clearly the motion speaks to sustainability outcomes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Hillstead.
Mayor Borman. I'm open to this amendment. I'm just not sure if I'm open to it at this time. To me, I would prefer to, like, in the future, I can see us funding them higher than the 54,000 and the 12.5%. Like, we can talk about that. But at this point, I would prefer to see the Economic Development Recovery Plan get more use of the money as administration recommended in the report. I just don't know if it's the right time to be increasing this amount just due to the pandemic. And since we don't know what the timelines are, I understand that this money could be used and it could help get us out of it. But at the same time, I think that there's some things that could be done now that administration's already doing that money could better be served. So I'm struggling with this one right now just because.
Well, let me ask you this. Were you struggling to the same extent when the motion was 54,000? I mean, are you concerned about giving any money or providing any money to TCK at this time? Or
No, I'm totally fine with the 54,000. I just think that.
So that extra.
It's just the uncertainty of the times.
46,000. Okay, well, I think if now isn't the time to be working full-heartedly with the business community to rebuild our economy, if now isn't the time, I don't know when it is. And I don't know whether it's next month or 3 months but I continue to be, I'm determined to be optimistic that the pandemic will be, the threat to the community will be reduced at some point in the future. And I think it behooves us to, as elected members of council, to do all we can to support our business community and through that support our entire community. The trickle down by supporting businesses and keeping them solvent is trickling down and helping everybody else at the same time. So if now's not the time to be taking these steps, I just don't know when the time is.
Well, I think our Economic Development Recovery Plan is helping with that. It's just a different way of doing it. I see them working in conjunction, but I just also have faith in the Economic Development Recovery Plan. It's already being put out there in certain ways, as Ms. Paquette said during her presentation. So I see that helping businesses now and into the future. So I just would prefer more fluidness, I guess.
Councillor Comfort.
Yeah, I have to agree with Councillor Hillstead. Much as it pains me to do so. No, I'm just saying that I think that of course we want to support the business community. Of course we do. They've taken such a hit. And as a former independent business owner, I can't imagine what this would be like. I just can't even, it would be a nightmare, like just such a nightmare. So I just think it's a little premature in terms of the how and the why of it. That we should support businesses is goes without saying, I think. But I'm just not sure this is the best way to do it. And we don't have unlimited reserves. And I just think we should maybe hang tough. And as Jeff pointed out, we do have other mechanisms in place and other things moving forward. So I would like to see maybe even as soon as a couple of weeks where things lie, where things sit. So I'm having trouble with it too, Mayor Barwin.
Just in regards to what Councillor Hillstead was saying, and he mentioned that he prefers to rely on the Economic Development and Recovery Plan. Am I right? You said that? Right. My understanding is that this plan hasn't been developed yet. Am I wrong?
No, that's correct. It's in the development stages.
Right. So we don't have an Economic Development and Recovery Plan at this time. Just understand that. It's one will be developed, and I'm quite confident it'll be a good plan, but there isn't one right now. There is the ability in our business sector with our partners through the Canmore Business Alliance and TCK particularly. I'm certain that they're already working on plans to bring our economy out of the terrible place it is. I'm certain that they are developing plans now as well. So regardless, I think we've been around the bush on this enough, unless there's any other discussion that's required. Anybody else have anything else to add to this debate? See none, the question which you saw on the overhead. I'll call the question for this amending motion. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's defeated with Councillors Seeley, McCallum, Mayor Borman in support. Okay, we're well past the time that the agenda suggested we would take a short meeting break. So I'll just with a nod, is 15 minutes the appropriate time? Okay, so we'll take a 15-minute break and we'll be back to resume with
the main motion.
Oh, the main motion. Yeah, let's. Right, we just amended the. Okay, back to the motion as amended. Thank you.
Did
So
you
the amendment was approved.
The amendment was defeated?
Defeated, I mean, right. So we're back to the main motion.
Correct.
So the main motion that you saw in your package, it's not been amended. So it's to provide $54,000 in funding to TCK. So on that question, is there discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Now I'll go to a 15-minute break. So I'm going to go by the time on my laptop. So let's call it 11:20. So 11:35 we'll be back. Am I live again?
Yes, you are live. However, we're missing Councillor McCallum. Councillor McCallum is back now.
Now, are we live on?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Great. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. And moving on then to item J1, pandemic response rate. Just before we do that, we're running about an hour behind, so I'm going to suggest we put another hour in on this before we take a break for lunch. Does that work for everybody? I'm getting nods all around, so we'll go to about 12:30. So, Ms. DeSoto, it's to you for the pandemic response update.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Borman. I just have a verbal update for you. And I'm pleased to provide an overview of what we've been doing in response and planning regarding the COVID-19 health emergency. As I know you can imagine, it continues to consume a great deal of our municipal resources. I'll begin by providing an update on the actions and priorities of our Emergency Coordination Center, or ECC. The ECC continues to receive updates daily from both the province-wide Emergency Ops Center as well as from Alberta Health Services. We meet as a team daily to review and establish response actions that may be needed, and we filter those decisions through the lens of 5 established priorities. And I'll just read out those priorities for you in no particular order. They're first, to prioritize the health and well-being of our staff and residents, to support the provincial effort to contain the virus, to maintain essential services and critical infrastructure, to support businesses and mitigate economic loss. And the 5th is to maintain business continuity during the emergency response. So actions the ECC has taken to support those priorities since my last update to you, which was done on March 24th at your special meeting. As you're all aware, we declared the state of local emergency, or SOL, and we did that on March 25th. And then we renewed that SOL on March 31st, and again this week, I believe just yesterday. And I want to advise that we intend to renew the state of local emergency weekly as long as we continue to have a number of extraordinary measures in place to support the emergency. And some of those measures include closure of municipal facilities like our rec centers, the enhanced communication protocols that we have underway, the fact that we have our social services, our emergency social services team called together, and they're supporting the operation of a municipal call center. We've also closed some of our outdoor facilities, municipal playgrounds and outdoor skating surfaces. We're providing support to external agencies as well. We've been providing support to Alberta Parks with their closure of recreation areas, and to Alberta Health Services. So far, we've been supporting them by amplifying their public health messaging, as well as doing some pre-planning around a number of initiatives, including alternative care locations, drive-through testing sites, and self-isolation housing units. So that's been the work of the ECC. I'd now like to turn and talk a little bit about how the pandemic is impacting our municipal operations and service delivery. So specifically within our corporate services division, almost all of our departments in that area have turned their attention to managing the impacts of the health crisis. And this includes the IT department. They are supporting over 90 of our employees now who are now working remotely. Our communications team, who are completely solely focused on building daily communiques for public and staff. Robin Denaj, as of yesterday, shared with me that we've had over 39,000 page views on our COVID-19 page of our website, and we've had 587 people sign up to receive our emergency newsletter. So they've been doing a tremendous job at the communication side of things. Of course, our human resources team has also been fully engaged in supporting staff redeployments, all of the modified work arrangements, self-isolations for a number of employees, and unfortunately having to work through some logistics of staff layoffs. In addition, our community social development, and as you just heard from Eleanor McClett, our economic development team have been extremely busy supporting resident and business communities. They've jointly, either through the call center or through the economic development team, responded to hundreds of emails and phone calls from citizens and businesses who have been looking for more information and support. And now the areas that have experienced the greatest disruption is, of course, our recreation and facilities teams. This was due to the closure of both the Canmore Recreation Center and Elevation Place, and that's already been 3 weeks ago that we closed those facilities. So in that last 3 weeks, we've made a number of operational adjustments to mitigate the impact of those closures. Specifically, we upped the timing of the annual pool and ice maintenance programs that we do typically later in the year. That way we won't have to close the facilities again once they've reopened. We've redeployed a number of staff, specifically in recreation, to support other areas that are stretched thinly by the workload of the pandemic. And we've been addressing a number of administrative tasks, policy and procedure manuals and those types of things, and also planning for reopening the facilities. Those are very large facilities with a number of programmers and people that use them. So there has to be some thought and effort into planning for reopening. But as I just mentioned, unfortunately, we've also had to issue a number of layoffs for casual and contracted staff so far. Now, despite all of those disruptions to the regular workload, some of our departments have really been operating business as usual, albeit most of the employees working from home if they're not in the operational sides of things. But those departments include our engineering and planning teams, our public works department, fire and rescue, bylaw, and municipal clerk area. So they have continued to do their business remotely for the most part, or shifting their time of arriving at work if they're in operational areas so they can maintain the physical distancing protocols. So as we reach the end of that first month of the pandemic response, we are now starting to turn our attention to expanding the financial impact mitigation strategies, and our finance area is specifically working on that. You'll recall that they also brought forward a request for council to approve the tax and utility deferral program, and that was done 2 weeks ago at your special meeting. And Ms. Richardson shared with me that there was approximately 180 applications for deferral that have been received to date. That was again as of just this weekend, and some of those have been for multiple properties. So moving forward, we've asked our managers, they've been tasked with identifying the revenue and expenditure impacts in their areas in the short, medium, and long-term scenarios of what this pandemic duration might look like. We will be holding a workshop with council in the coming days to lay out some options for budget and service level adjustments. And we'll be bringing back proposals for council consideration in the public at the Finance Committee meeting later in the month. So we do know that there will be some immediate impacts to programs that are already approved and have had their budgets, some of them expended. And these include the paid parking, safe park, and fire peak staffing projects. And we have members of staff standing by to give you updates on those 3 important initiatives. But for me, that's a sense of what we've been spending our time doing over the last couple of weeks since we last reported. It has been a lot of work and a lot of effort. And before we have the team give you the updates on those 3 specific programs, I can pause now and open it up to any questions you may have for me, just on our either ECC operation or any of the impacts to our service delivery. Thank you.
Are there any questions from members of council, from Ms. DeSoto? Councillor Comfort?
Yeah, I'm just curious, Lisa, how does the the 2013 experience with the ECC rather, inform the current experience?
That's a great question. You know, what we're learning is every emergency is different and unique. We don't have an incident per se that we're responding to. So we've had several distinct phases. I would say the first week, we were very much focused internally on our existing staff, supporting them with remote work, supporting them with loss of childcare when that school closure was announced, and supporting a number of staff who were coming back from vacations from out of country and had to go on leaves. So finding them modified work, etc. We then quickly moved into community supports and, for example, bringing forward a recommendation that council approved for tax and utility deferrals, setting up the call center, dealing with a number of calls for more information and communication around what the provincial mitigations might look like. So we are now looking at longer term strategic elements like financial program and all of our capital and operating service delivery and how that might change. So I would say it's been very different. The structure though, and the attention that we're giving to the ECC has benefit. You know, we have Greg Burt, who is now operating as our Director of Emergency Management. So he has been sort of keeping us focused and is our main liaison with our external agencies at the province and at Alberta Health Services. So that's worked really well. And we're also spending the time to connect with our regional communities, Town of Banff and the MD of Bighorn and Kananaskis Improvement District, so that we're aware of what our neighbors are being impacted with as well.
Thank you. And thank you for this work. Oh.
I might just throw in, it's not the town of Canmore, but it's certainly of interest to everybody. I did have a text conversation with Dr. Wickham this morning, who's, as you all know, the chief of emergency at the hospital, and he indicated that there are no admissions in hospital that are related to COVID. And he commented that, in his opinion, the community is doing an excellent job with social isolation and hand hygiene measures. So that was really quite reassuring for me to hear from Dr. Wickham. And I think is a message that I'll try to get out in the broader community. Is there any other discussion? Questions for Ms. DeSoto? Oh, Councillor Mara. I was distracted by Councillor Comfort there. She sent a message. We're taking a break at 12:30. That was Councillor Mara.
Thank you, Lisa, and your team for all your work. I'm just wondering how communications would come down through the ECT or messaging regarding some other communities are and other provinces are experiencing problems with people face sewer and waste problems, as in people putting gloves and handy wipes down. I know we're educated really well as a community. I just wonder if there's any problems like that or messaging, and it would come through the town of Canmore if there was a problem.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Mara. I have seen other communities certainly, again, doing some broadcasts around don't throw your wipes into the sewer. So we have done some public messaging about that in the past, and it's certainly something that we can amp up. EPCOR is also supporting us in that messaging. So we are happy to get that messaging out, and that's something I can encourage our team to do, and we can work with EPCOR to get that messaging out. I haven't heard that that's a concern locally, but certainly I can check in with Mr. Como and EPCOR on that.
Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you for your verbal presentation, Ms. DeSoto, and all your hard work as well as that of your team. I was wondering if you could tell me how many layoffs were issued earlier.
Yes, I believe it is 89. And those were all casual recreation staff. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I just was updated. It's 93.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. DeSoto? Councillor Seeley.
Just wondering about our messaging to other communities. The signage and everything else discourages people if, and I don't think it's intended, but maybe it is, from Bow Valley. So people from Banff, are they still welcome in our community to shop at the grocery stores, things like that? And if so, then we should maybe adjust the messaging a little bit, soften it.
Thank you, Councillor Seeley. The messaging, at least on the mobile signs, say do your part, stay home, and sorry, I can't recall exactly what the last line is. It's around social distancing. But it's really about doing your part and having social responsibility. Avoid gatherings. Sorry, it says do your part, stay home, and avoid gatherings. So that message is not just for out-of-towners, it's for our local residents as well. So it's, you know, trying to get folks to stay within their communities, but of course, if Banff residents need to come here for appointments or to get groceries, that is perfectly permissible, and it's not something that we are enforcing in any way.
Yeah, I'd like to note as well, I mean, the residents in the MD of Bighorn, in Exshaw and Deadman's, Harvey Heights, Lac des Arcs, this is where they have to come for almost everything. So we're certainly not trying to discourage the residents of the MD of Bighorn from coming into town, with the proviso that Lisa, Ms. DeSoto just mentioned, you know, do your part. And Banff and Canmore, although we're separate towns, we're still essentially one community. And I know there's a number of Banff residents that do get a lot of their services here in Canmore, and to some extent the reverse is true. So I think we have to balance everything with a little rationality here. Any other questions for Ms. DeSoto? Councillor Comfort.
So on that last point, really the message coming from the authorities, the powers that are, is stay home, period. And I'm going stir crazy. The kitten's biting me and scratching me and dogs are barking and it's making me crazy. But it's really clear. That's the message. If you don't have to go somewhere, don't go. So I think in order to try to really flatten that curve and get ourselves out of the situation sooner, we should not soften the message. That should be the message. Stay home. Stay home. So, and I hate it. I can't see. My kids dropped in unexpectedly and we waved at them from 10 feet away on our deck, you know, to say hi to them. It's and even then I felt hinky. So I really feel very strongly we should just follow the directives of AHS, and that should be the message. Because once if this thing hits you, I mean, I'm immunocompromised. If it hits me, I could be dead, and that's not something that we've ever really faced before. So please stay home. That's all.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, thanks very much for your presentation, Ms. DeSoto.
Thank you.
We'll move on then to item J2, COVID-19 impacts on the parking strategy implementation. And I believe presenting is Mr. Godberson.
Yep. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Can you see me all right there?
Yep.
I'm
just going to hop in.
Oh, Mr. Asarte.
Good morning,
Look, you're
Mayor.
all dressed up with the tie and everything. That's impressive.
It's the only chance I get to get out of pajamas. So, good morning, Mayor and Council. Mr. Goberson and I are here. We're going to provide an overview of work that's been done recently to review options for moving forward with the parking management work that we were looking to implement this summer in light of the business and visitation impacts from COVID-19. I'd like to introduce Leif Godberson. He's our project coordinator who will be presenting detail for your information and forward discussion. Mr. Godberson is our engineering intern. He joined us from UBC last May, and he's been leading all of the details, all the work internally and with the contractor for the implementation of paid parking since its approval back in the fall. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Godberson.
Thanks very much, and welcome to this interesting way of presenting to council, Mr. Godberson.
Yes, it is unique. Well, good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm here today to provide an overview of recommendations for the implementation of paid parking this summer that differs from what was initially proposed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to start off with a brief discussion regarding the impacts of COVID-19 on the implementation of paid parking, followed by the alternative implementation options considered and the implications of these options. We will then conclude with recommendations on how to proceed and next steps. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting town center businesses and community visitation. It is expected that the impacts to businesses and parking demand will continue throughout 2020. The primary goal of a paid parking strategy was to ensure parking availability during peak times. This summer, with occupancies not expected to exceed 80% utilization on a consistent basis, this isn't anticipated to be an issue. Administration has investigated two implementation options. The first of these options considered would be a partial rollout. A partial rollout would essentially look the same as a full paid parking implementation. However, we wouldn't be charging for parking. It would include the addition of new signage and new time restrictions, but with no payment required whatsoever. The residential parking permit system would go live June 1st, and residents in qualifying zones would be required to register in order to be exempt from new on-street time restrictions. This partial rollout option would essentially allow for a full implementation of the program, but users would not be charged for parking. This option would allow us to complete the parking management system, procure the required infrastructure, and complete installations. Having the system fully set up like this would allow paid parking to go online very easily in the future. Operating costs could be reduced but not entirely eliminated, as Park Plus customer service representatives would be required to facilitate the residential parking permit program. A partial rollout may be difficult to communicate the rationale to users and businesses for changes to time restrictions. The other and recommended option is to maintain the current system as is for 2020. Maintaining the current system as is would include completing the work to develop the system and completing the capital procurement process, including poles and signage. However, no new signage would be installed. Existing time restrictions would continue to be enforced, and the residential parking permit system would not be implemented. Maintaining the current system as is would have the least impact on the public and businesses, while still taking advantage of the work that has already been completed. Operating costs could be reduced to an absolute minimum, and this option would allow, it would also avoid any potential challenges that could stem from the installation of the poles and accompanying signage. Having the development and procurement of the planned parking management system completed would preserve the investment to date and would allow for an efficient rollout when the time comes for full implementation of paid parking. There are a few other considerations that I would like to discuss. As part of the parking management implementation plan, an enforcement module is being developed in tandem to improve the current enforcement process and provide the public with online parking infraction payment options. There is value to putting the system in place this year, regardless of the implementation option pursued. This would allow any parking related tickets to be issued with the new enforcement application, leading to a more streamlined administrative process than is currently used. And this year in particular, there is value to providing online ticket payment options. There are operating costs, however, associated, and we understand these costs need to be considered by the organization and council as part of upcoming COVID-19 financial discussions. On December 3rd of 2019, council approved that revenues generated from paid parking will be used to fund fare-free local transit in perpetuity. As a result of a modified implementation for this year, anticipated revenues from paid parking to fund fare-free transit will be impacted. Currently, our team is working with the Bow Valley Regional Transit Commission to address this loss of revenue together with other Rome financial impacts associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. We understand at the moment that current operating reserves at the Commission are expected to fully cover loss of revenue due to paid parking and fare revenue reductions. So it's recommended to pursue option 2 and maintain current town center parking regulations by delaying a paid parking implementation, any regulation changes, and the residential parking permit program until parking demand returns and exceeds our target utilizations on a consistent basis, and no earlier than spring of 2021. And we are looking for feedback from council today, and we expect this discussion to inform future financial discussions around COVID-19. We will be coming back to council with a decision report in May. So at this time, I'd like to, if you have any questions, answer them for you.
Great, thanks very much. And I don't have questions, frankly, just express my appreciation for engineering to take this step. I think it's really a well-advised idea. You know, if we had rolled out the paid parking just because at this time, it would be sending the wrong message. So thanks to engineering for reconsidering and figuring out how to keep things moving along in a meaningful way and getting us where we ultimately want to get. I understand that this will be coming back to council for more formal discussion, and at that time, if it's necessary to rescind the motion from December, which I think is likely, we'll be able to do that then. This is literally just for discussion at this point. And I'm looking to councilors. Councilor McKellen, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor Barman. No, I don't have a question, more a comment like yourself. This is both two very well, and I believe the recommended option. I would like to know in the financial impact section, so I guess I do have a question. It says costs for transits are being mitigated by service reductions, and there are some funds being known and made available at the time this report is presented to council. So do we have that number now, or basically we have enough? Is that the number? We have enough?
The estimated impact of a combination of loss of paid parking revenue and fare collection reduction on the regional route specifically, and that's about what we have in by the commission. They're also in that they're assuming that for the summertime and that there will be consistent fare reduction for the remainder of the year. The impacts for fare collection on the regional will continue. And we've just asked them to look at another scenario, and they are working on that right now, where reduction of service beyond that time frame to understand if that also will cover the expected shortfalls.
Thank you. I think that option 2 is the right option, and with the amended request to acknowledge it going. Thank you for bringing this to council. This is very well thought out. Thanks.
Just confirming what I think you indicate, messaging in the community around this clear and broadly implement, fully advise pause in paid parking.
Yeah, that's correct. We'll be working closely with communications to.
Excellent. I think I'm sensing full stream 2. Is no, everybody's. So if that's what you were looking for today, I think you've got it. Councillor McCallum, you had a question?
I just had a question. I just wanted to make sure. So in the amendment, does it actually refer to the 80? No, because we're not, this is just information. I'm sorry. I just recollect in the report that, and in the presentation, that the parking vacancy needed to be 20% or less, or was it 15%? Was it an 85% use rate to actually trigger?
Yeah, so
programming?
Yeah, so the premise of the parking program was to ensure that we have about at least 20% occupancy. That number varies 5%. I mean, it's impossible to keep it completely consistent. But the overriding rationale behind this program was to keep those occupancies vacant so that parking stalls are available. So considering we likely won't be at 100% utilization this summer, that's where our rationale is stemming from.
Thank you.
Great. So you both have everything you need for today from council?
We do. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for bringing this to our attention today.
Thank you.
And with that, we will move on to Ms. Brown, the verbal report on Safe Park program update. Ms. Brown, you're on.
Oh, fantastic. Good morning, Mayor, member of councils. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm here today to give you a brief update on the Safe Park program. As a result of the pandemic, we have had to reimagine the Safe Park program for this spring and potentially this season. In February, Ms. Gilchrist, Supervisor of FCSS, shared with you the program details for the 2020 Safe Park program. The Safe Park program was originally intended to provide Canmore residents who were seasonally employed with a safe place to stay while working in Canmore. Sadly, many of our businesses are currently closed and demand for seasonal workforce will not be the same, at least not in the spring. And as such, we're postponing the Safe Park program itself. The staff resource that we were hoping to hire for administration of the Safe Park program will now be hired to monitor emerging housing needs and the changing resources within our community. We really want to understand. The landscape is changing. We really want to understand that. As we continue to monitor the changing needs within our community, we will also create potential plans to address different possible community scenarios so that we are prepared if any of those scenarios come to fruition. If the situation does stabilize and our community opens up again, we will work with different municipal departments, such as the Economic Development Department, to launch either the Safe Park program or another program to support our seasonal workforce and individuals who are in need of housing. If the Safe Park program cannot be launched this year, we will carefully document the changing needs of our community and adjust the Safe Park program accordingly so that we can successfully launch the right program next year. This is an unprecedented time and the needs of our community are still emerging. And as such, we will organize our programs that we can be both flexible and responsive during this uncertain time. And I'll be sure to update council as the situation continues to evolve. Again, thank you for your time. Can I answer any questions?
Are there any questions at this time from members of council? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Brown. I was wondering if you could give us more detail about this position switch that you are planning for the from the Safe Park program to this emergency housing needs position?
So right now what we're doing is we're looking at thresholds within our community of things that we really need to be aware of, and then what would happen if. So for instance, what if more individuals start living and residing in their vehicles? The situation for why they're residing in their vehicles is most likely different than what the Safe Park program was based on.
Yeah.
So we want to understand that and make sure that we can safely house people appropriately, or work with other resources to make sure that individuals maybe don't lose their housing in the first place. So what we're trying to do is understand where those thresholds are and make a plan so that if it gets to that point where, and it seems to happen quite quickly, where all of a sudden we have 50 or even 20 people who are residing in their van, we need to react quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions specific to this report? Seeing none, thanks very much for putting this together, Ms. Brown. I think it's, again, just with as with the engineering report, it's timely. There's certainly questions in the community about how some of these plans that we developed some time ago would be rolling out or not rolling out. I appreciate the work your team continues to do to assess the need in our community, and we all know that the needs are going to get greater, not less. So it's reassuring knowing that we have such an awesome team here in your department working on these matters. So please pass along my kudos to everybody on your team. We've agreed to continue to 12:30. I think we can finish, we can have Chief Goller's report accomplished, done by then, and because we'll be going, the only remaining work is in camera, and we'll be cutting the live streaming before we go in camera. So it'd be nice to finish with the open part of the meeting before we take a break for lunch, and then we can come back and just be in camera. Does that work for everybody? And that works for Ms. Hyde. We can make that work.
Yes, we can make that work.
Perfect. So then looking at item J4, the emergency peak staffing. Chief, you have the mic.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor and Council. First of all, greetings from the fire hall and from fire rescue. Respecting the time, I'm just going to deliver a brief verbal update on adjustments we've made on our operational footprint and specifically our peak staffing in response to this pandemic that we're facing. And also the opportunity, if there are any questions about fire rescue, is a great chance to ask that on how we're doing. The item on hand right now is the peak staffing. Council approved again for 2020, basically in pro-action for the busy season that we have here, and tried to reduce the number of times it takes for people to respond to the station and decrease our response times. That was scheduled to start in May of this year. In response to this pandemic, we've decided to start peak staffing a little bit earlier and have readjusted the hours around when we're running it. One of the biggest challenges we're finding in the fire rescue service is keeping everybody as healthy as possible. With the 24/7 staffing here, right across the industry, we're seeing that the sick time or the isolation time that is required by AHS really cuts into staffing challenges sometimes there. So in order to do that, we're cutting down as many possible vector points or pathways into the fire hall as possible but still maintaining a full operational footprint. So historically, in this time of year, we have our general pages, our community firefighters respond to all calls. That's a relatively high number, and it brings a lot of people into the station on a regular basis where they don't necessarily are always required. What we've done is taken the same budget amount that has been approved for May through September and spread it out over the next 2 to 3 months. And we're adding 1 firefighter per shift, 24/7, from our casual pool and from that same budget amount. And that truck will respond immediately to all alarms and service calls. That will cut our general pages down by approximately 60%. And our community firefighters will be responding to all significant events, fires, rescues, every time we need the additional staff. We think that's a proactive move to protect the staff in the station and the community firefighters themselves. That's going to start on Thursday, and we've had more than enough staff interest to cover that time. With a 2-month trial, we're hoping that's going to get us through the peak of this pandemic, but it's really anyone's guess. But by doing that for 2 months, we still will have budget left over to run a partial summer peak staffing program. So all is not lost there. But we're going to take these 2 months and use that to use the peak staffing model. And it'll also give our community firefighters a little bit of a break. And when we're calling them, it's for a significant event. So I just want to update you on that peak staffing piece there. Just generalized around the pandemic piece, we've instituted a large number of protocols within the station, specifically around hygiene, sterilization, operational footprint. To be clear, we are still responding to medical events under the guidance of our medical director, Dr. Wickham, and AHS. And we have noticed a slight tick downwards of those because working with AHS, we're making sure we're going to the right calls at the right times where we can affect patient outcomes. But we have instituted a full suite of personal protective equipment around that piece, and we're pretty confident we can manage that risk on that end of things. Other than that, your fire rescue department is fully operational, 24/7. The entire team is set up to go, and I think pretty comfortable with all the safeguards we've put in place to protect not only the firefighters, but the public that we're serving as well. So with that, respecting your time, I'd love to take some questions, if any, on this topic.
Are there questions from members of council? Councillor Mara.
Thank you, Chief Geller, on your report, and thank you to all your staff and everybody for your commitment to our community. I was just wondering, when you said about the PPE, you said you have enough, a sufficient amount in stock?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. I appear to be surrounded by some fairly capable hunter-gatherers, and we're in pretty good shape. We are set up appropriately for the next number of months. We don't see any significant pinch points for us at this point in time. And in fact, we are now working directly with ECC through Dem Greg Burt and to coordinate PPE for the rest of the town staff, so we can look after the whole family, frankly.
Thank you.
So the intent is to add one additional full-time firefighter, one extra firefighter per shift for 2 months, and which is great. I think that's a really well-advised plan. But you note that that will result in reduced funding for the expected staffing model in the summer. And I'm just assuming that when we get to that point of discussion, there may be a report requesting some additional funding to repeat the same program that we so successfully tested last summer, which was clearly a very a good change to implement.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll be coming forward to council at some point in the future, A, to report on this, and B, to perhaps request additional funding to go to the 4 staff in the hall model?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that question. That's great, actually. I plan to report to council throughout this 2-month trial because it's a little bit of a different operational footprint for us. I think there's some strong advantages in it. I will be reporting to council on that within 6 to 8 weeks at the longest, just on how it's going and letting the situation evolve in the community as well on that. Recognizing that the entire town is certainly going to have some significant needs. I'll be very careful with any budget recommendation going forward. And we're hoping to fully maximize the council approved budget that's already in place to get us through the summer.
That's great. Thank you. Are there any questions for the chief? One question I have, just not related to the report you're bringing, but we talked in the past about you working, or fire and rescue working with the hospital to erect the emergency field tent, and that's happened now. Is that in place?
Yes, sir. There's a very large UFO sitting right in front of the hospital right now. I just contacted the hospital director on that and the second administrator there as well. It was erected yesterday on the request of AHS, and so far they seem very happy with it. They may be using it slightly differently than they originally intended, but they see great value in having that piece of equipment there. We're happy to do it and to put it to work. It's a town asset that I'm really glad to see that it's going to work. But it's up and running now, and how the hospital specifically uses it will be to them, but we're going to certainly support them as long as they want us to.
And that's great. And I'm really happy to see the town and fire and rescue working proactively with the AHS, of course. I think that's awesome. Just thinking about the public messaging, and I guess this is directed to Ms. Dinaj, but I picked up, at least from one correspondent, the interpretation that some people are giving that is that things are getting worse because now they see, this emergency structure in front of the hospital. So their minds go to the worst case scenario and think it means things are worse than ever here. So it's important that we keep that message clear in the public that this is a way in which we're working together with the hospital to be prepared for any future changes, not in response to things that have changed.
Yes, sir, absolutely. I agree with that. And actually, before we even set up the tent, Barb Shelley from AHS from the hospital has actually requested that she would take the lead on communications around this piece.
Great. Okay.
And frankly, from fire's point of view, we're just the doers, and we'll certainly let the town's communication team manage that message.
Absolutely. That's fabulous. Are there any other questions or comments from council for Chief Collar? Seeing none, thanks very much for being here today. And again, I'll pass along to your crew kudos from me and from us, I'm sure, for the work you do. As always, it's so reassuring to know that we have such a well-trained and committed crew in fire and rescue. So keep on doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. We really appreciate the time.
You bet. So at this point, we can call a break. Just for anybody that's viewing the online recording of this, when we go in camera, the live streaming will stop because council won't be coming out of in camera back into a public meeting. We'll just adjourn the meeting after the in-camera portion. So that's just a heads up. Is there anything else I should point out, Ms. DeSoto?
Nope, that's everything.
Great. So call it 12:30. If we start up again, does everybody want to go to 1:30 or 1:15? How long? Let's show hands 1:15 to start again. Okay, we'll come back at 1:15. That gives you 45 minutes to take a break and get some food.
Thank you.
All good?
Well done.
Okay, over and out. Don't leave the meeting though.